Race and diversity. This is a very tough subject for me to talk about. I've been trying to put the subject off for about a week and a half. I had a situation that happened to me, but first I want to start off by saying that my husband sent me a message. It had to do with a person on TikTok that did a message on Dear Black Women. And so I watched that video and I was like, okay, so this person was saying the importance of him growing up as a person from East Indian. I don't want to mess this up because I'm talking about race and, of course, the diversity. But he was saying that him growing up, and I think someplace in Europe, I'll just say it that way, that his mom told him that if he ever got into a situation where he felt uncomfortable or whatever, that look for a Black woman, look for a Black female, whether it was a teacher, whomever, and that they would help him through the situation. So that was a really good video. So if I would suggest you go to TikTok and look up that video. And so then from there, I said, okay, well, he decided to have that subject, to talk about that subject, because something went down a week or so ago or whatever. I'm not that in tune with what's going on with some subjects. But another group of these two men who are YouTubers had their own podcast. And I guess they're in, again, Europe, maybe Britain, somewhere like that. And I don't know, Stitching Gigs or whatever. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but just you can also Google them. But I guess they were on a tour in the United States, and they were on this gentleman's show who happened to be a Caucasian. The two gentlemen were British African Americans or whatever. I don't know what they would call themselves. Anyway, they were on the show. The conversation had to, started off with them talking about Black women. I went and watched it myself. I didn't watch the 2-hour segment, but again, going down a rabbit hole. So I guess the backlash came when the two gentlemen that were brown-skinned men did not defend African-American females or Black women in general. It was a bunch of laughter, and people say, men will be men. Anyway, after all of that, starting from the Dear Black Women, going to these two gentlemen who are podcasters in Europe, coming to the United States, I was like, you know what, maybe it is time for me to just talk about the situation that happened to me like almost 2 weeks ago. Because there's still not an understanding that race is an issue in the United States. It is everywhere, a lot of different places. And diversity, they're two different things. Let me just start off by reading the description that anybody can Google. But race, any one of the groups that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry, such as hair type, eye color, skin tone, stature, etc. And the word race has not been around forever, just since the 16th century. A Swedish gentleman proposed a classification of humankind into 4 distinct races. Okay, so that's a different subject. You can go and Google that on your own. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But then there's diversity. Diversity, it says, the state of being diverse, variety. Would help if I put my glasses on. And then the second part, which is the one I love, it says, for diversity, the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, etc., etc. So this brings me to where I was in a class, and I'm going to leave it general on purpose because I come from a small area and people can figure things out. I'm not trying to get anybody else in trouble. I'm just trying to tell my story. So I was in a class, been in this class for about 2 or 3 cycles because there was something, learning, educating myself on actually media, podcasting, all those type of things. And the class was pretty small. We had been in the class for a while together, so we all knew how to work together. The instructor started off with one instructor, then they added another instructor, so we had co-instructors for the class. And I have to say, one happens to be older and he's in a wheelchair, so he understands diversity. I'm not saying the other one didn't understand, but this leads into the situation. So any person who looks like me or just a person of color, you understand that when you walk in this skin every single day that you cannot take off, that you have situations, whether it's just rudeness from people or a microaggression, or, and I was also a veteran. So there's some things that happened to me while I was in the military. And I didn't even know that at that time, we're talking way back, served during Desert Storm, that things that happened to you didn't have a name like microaggression. So I have, children that are adults. And now when you speak of things, they're like, no, mommy, that's a microaggression. That's a systemic racism. That's a this. So when I was growing up, there was not a name like that that I knew of. So being in the class, situations would come up. And let me back it up a week or 3 weeks before that. There was a huge celebration. And when you live in New England, you notice when you have this beautiful melanin skin. When you walk into a restaurant, you're looking to see how many people in the restaurant look like you. When you walk into the grocery store, if you go into a new town and you have to stop and go and use the restroom, you survey the area and you're like, how many people look like this? Because you want to feel safe and you want to feel comfortable in the United States, okay? And there are a lot of people that are out there that don't think that these things, that people still have to think this way. But when you grow up in a certain environment, and I grew up in a pretty, suburban area, safe, not a lot of my teachers were of color growing up where I grew up. And so it's just a thing that you do. And then when you have children, I have children, you teach them, do things in pairs. When you go into the store, don't raise your arms and flap, because people will stare at you and maybe think you're trying to steal something. So these are just the things that we think of. And then when your kids start to drive, you say, okay, be respectful to police officers, keep both hands on the steering wheel. If you ever get stopped for something, don't be sarcastic. You give them the rundown on how they should conduct themselves in public, because heaven forbid something ever to happen to them. You want to know that they were respectful and that stuff happens, and that's just what you do. And I think that if you are in a circle and you don't have any friends that look like me, you need to go and ask somebody, because you may not have to raise your children the same way that we raise our children. And I can't even say that everybody who has the same skin tone as me, that they might not even think that for their kids. But for the most part, the people that I know, that's what they do. You school your children on the appropriate behavior if you get stopped by a police officer, or getting followed around in the store. Don't be rude. Just get your stuff, get out the store. And I have been followed in the store plenty of times. So I was at a function, and again, you survey the room. You always see how many people in the room look like you, and you still conduct yourself, professionally or whatever. But I was at a function, and I noticed that at this function, myself and only one other person was a person of color. And then a lot of times I have to admit, there might be people in the room that are people of color or of other ethnicities, but sometimes you can't tell. And I even had a great grandmother that grew up in Maine. My father was born in Maine, and he's a person of color. And the story that was told to me is that my great grandmother, I do remember her, she was fair skinned. And so the rest of her family could pass. And when you say pass, it means that they could pass for people Caucasian. And my grandmother was very light skinned, but when people would come to the door at certain times, they would take her and they would hide her in the closet because they could pass, but she couldn't. She kind of looked, she still had nice, soft, wavy hair or whatever, and fair skin. I hope that I'm not trying to offend anybody who might be watching this later. I'm just trying to get the words out here. So be nice in the comments. So that was my great grandmother. And I have a lot of multicultural mixed people in my family. So there are a lot of people in the world that could be a minority, or I don't like that term either. They could pass. So I'm at this function. They're having a great celebration. And I noticed that there's everybody on the board and everybody who's there to celebrate. There's not one person of color, not one person that I could see of color. And so I actually went up to the person who, let's see, I'm trying to keep this generalized. The person who was in charge that I had met before, And the person happened to be a female. And I said to her, I said, I have a very uncomfortable question to ask you. And the person said, sure, what's the question? I said, when you walk into a building and you don't see that very much diversity, it kind of makes you wonder. I mean, this is a good size corporation, and I'm trying to keep it general. And it would be nice if we had more diversity in the building, either if it's somebody at the front desk or somebody taking over certain positions, whatever. And the person said to me, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And very professional. She says, we will look into this matter. And that made me feel good, even if they never look into the matter, even if it doesn't change and they never get a person of color in the. At least the person, I was heard. I felt heard and I felt validated. And so and the person said, thank you, went on about our businesses. So then we have another function coming up in the same building, the same atmosphere. It could be any big corporation, I'm telling you, coming up in October. And I said to the people who are in charge of my class, I said, the next time they have this big event where they're taking pictures and the governor of the state and this person and that person, when they all come, or if they come, when they come, can we have more diversity in the picture? And maybe I didn't just say it, maybe I didn't express myself well enough, because I know that when you have people coming for a big celebration and maybe people sponsored you for in some way, your class or your organization, you can't say, hey, we're having this organization, this big thing, this big shindig. Can you send over an African American, a Puerto Rican person, and a person of that's not professional. You can't do that. You just take whoever they send you. But what I was trying to say is, when those people get there, can we make sure that people from our class are in the ceremony? Maybe it's the ribbon cutting ceremony or whatever the ceremony is, whatever the lineup is, and the media is going to be there. Please let us have more diversity this time. And that's the same exact question that I posed to the other person 3 weeks prior. Well, that situation blew up. And I was like, what in the heck just happened? So I think a lot of times people get race and diversity mixed up. Yes, we have different segments of groups that make up one race, which I even hate that word, but it makes up one ethnicity. We have more than one ethnicity. So I'm asking not anything about race, but I'm saying this time when we have this big ceremony and the media is there, can we please have more diversity? Maybe, the person that's the other instructor was in a wheelchair, that's diversity. More women, men, diversity. Even people of color, diversity. That conversation did not go very well. Give me a second. I need some water. And for those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Nubia, and this is my channel, NubianQueen Nation. Usually I do nice little fluffy foo-foo videos, but sometimes when you have something on your heart that you just cannot let go of, because after that situation with my instructor, I actually could not sleep for that whole week. And it's because we didn't bait each other. I didn't plan that, but there was something that was said that triggered the person that was in charge of the class, and their comments triggered me. So if I'm being told, you can't, if you bring up the word race again, then I'm going to have you kicked out of the class. I was like, excuse me? Kicked out of the class. So I'm a grown woman. My husband, is a minister. He's gone different places, churches, and ministered the word. We're devout Christians. I homeschool my children. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm also a veteran. And I've never had somebody say that I will have you thrown out of the class for speaking your mind or speaking on race. Now, I am a grown woman, so I said, you know what? Maybe my timing wasn't right. But anything that I said as far as asking for more diversity, I don't take back those words. And I think that the thing that added more what do they say, insult to whatever, is that the person was an ex-police officer. Do you know how much anxiety that causes a person to be told by an ex-police officer that if you say this, thus, and so in a class, freedom of speech, I'm learning how to be a podcaster, honestly, that if you say those words again, we're going to have you thrown out of the class, kicked out of the class. And so I'm trying to sleep at night days after that, and all I can envision is me being physically removed from that class and kicked out of the building. That's traumatizing. I'm already a veteran trying to sort through my stuff. That's another level of PTSD. So here I am, like I said, 2 weeks later, and I'm Googling, I'm looking on YouTube, I see race, I see ethnicity, diversity, but I'm like, I was getting yelled and screamed at for always bringing up the word race, or for bringing up the word, I'm a person of color. Maybe if you're in a room and everybody is Caucasian, and in that discussion, I did say, hey, the whole board is Blanco. Everybody in that picture was Blanco. I was trying to ease it up by not using the word white, but white is white, Caucasian, whatever. And so I think that maybe it struck a chord, but to tell somebody that you're going to kick them out of the room for asking about diversity, that was a bit unnerving. And then me not really knowing, I was basically in tears. Of course, the whole class was there. That's why I said my timing may have been wrong. But you don't know what a person's response is going to be when you talk about a certain subject, any subject. So afterwards, I had the other women in the class rallied around me, and people, not trying to get anybody else in the class in trouble, but they're like, oh my goodness, what happened? How did I don't know. But I'm like, for me, I was like, what? That was totally out of character for me to engage in somebody bickering back and forth. But with his position as an ex-police officer, he was standing toe-to-toe with me, and I was not trying to be that. I'm not that argumentative of a person, honestly. I'd rather walk away from a situation than to yell and scream. That's not how I conduct myself, and that's not how my mother and father didn't teach me to do that, or my children. I'm we want to be a good example, So what I like to show you now is, because I finally, it took me a week and a half to write an email, to find the email and to send it to the person that I had spoken to 3 weeks prior. Because if she understood then, and this person actually kind of falls under her, then I would be able to explain to her, and she would understand that I posed that same question to you, and your response was nice, professional, and pleasant, and graceful. I don't know. And then the situation was totally out of control. So I did find one thing on the internet that I thought was appropriate, and I can't say it as well as this person. It was very well articulated, and I'll have to give this lady the credit because I'm using her video. So just give me a moment while I try and figure out how to do this, because I did it practice before Okay, let's see if I can do it. Give me a second. All right. And now I'm going to play her video. And like I said, I will give her credit in the comments after. All right. Let's see, where did the play button go? Is that it? Maybe that's it. Okay.
Friends, I want to stress something. Talking about race is not racist. Talking about racism is not racist. Pointing out racist behavior is not racist. Additionally, talking about these things does not mean you're spreading hate. It means that you're courageous enough to address hate. We cannot change anything without talking about it. But you do have to understand that those who don't want to change the system, who benefit from the system, will try to silence you. Friends, I want to stress something. Talking about race is not racist. Talking about racism is not racist. Pointing out racist behavior is not racist. Additionally, Talking about these things does not mean you're spreading hate. It means that you're courageous enough to address hate. We cannot change anything without talking about it. But you do have to understand that those who don't want to change the system, who benefit from the system, will try to silence you.
So I'm hoping that played over well. I won't be able to know if it actually went out correctly until I uploaded the message or listen to it again. But her name is The Real Randy B, and you can find her. That was a short of hers on YouTube. So she also had go over please and give her credit and listen to her video on her page. But when I was looking for this again, I went to her page because I'm like, wow, that was very, very, very profound. So these are the words that are on her website. She says, truthing is the act of openly being who you are. It means that you refuse to mask parts of your identity to make others feel comfortable. When you are truthing, you are sharing your thoughts and feelings. You are consciously living your truth. Truthing is stepping into and walking in your truth every day with every person. Truthing means that you allow people to see you, hear you, know you. Truthing does not mean that you aren't afraid of hesitant to share parts of yourself, like me today. It means that you do it anyway because you understand that your authentic voice and story matters. People perform better and feel better when they can be themselves. It is physically and psychologically damaging to bury pieces of yourself. Hearing other people's truth allows others to build empathy and trust, and to ultimately build authentic relationships. Environments shift positively when we start hearing from those voices who have typically been underrepresented. It's time to have a conversation. And in the end, she says, truthing with Randy B. So hopefully I don't get any kind of strike from reading that, and then I'll send this to her, or I know how they say it's easier to do the thing and ask for forgiveness afterwards. So hopefully she will forgive me for not asking ahead of time. But I just was so nervous about doing this. It's taking me all day to prepare my mindset and everything else. So that was Miss Randy B. Truthing with Miss Randy B. Let's see if I can change the screen now. Okay, thank you, Miss Randy B. All right, and the other thing that I wanted to share before I actually get off of here, there is a book called Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson, and I first heard about Dr. Claude Anderson by listening to Dr. Boyce Watkins, who I haven't listened to him in a while, but that's where I first found out about Dr. Claude Anderson. Lots of work, lots of books, professor. He was in education. You need to read his accolades on your own. But I'm going to read, this is the best description that I've heard also on racism. I had a conversation with the young girl that I call her my goddaughter. And she's not a person of color. I love her family dearly. And she was homeschooled. My kids were also homeschooled. And she's, our friends are family. Our families are friends. And I was telling them about the situation. And I sent this, she was trying to understand racism and prejudice. And she said, well, Black people could be racist too. And I'm like, no, sweetheart. Black people, they can be prejudiced. They have some biases. But let me read what Dr. Claude Anderson says about this subject. He says, I need my glasses, maybe if I hold it down here. What is racism as it concerns Blacks? Racism is a wealth and power-based competitive relationship between Blacks and non-Blacks. The sole purpose of racism is to support and ensure that the white majority and its ethnic subgroups continue to dominate and use Blacks as a means to produce wealth and power. Centuries of Black enslavement and Jim Crow semi-slavery resulted in the majority society becoming 99-foot giants, and blacks 1-foot midgets. This massive inequity in wealth and resources made blacks non-competitive and totally dependent upon whites for the necessities of life. True racism exists only when one group holds a disproportionate share of wealth and power over another group, then uses those resources to marginalize, exploit, and subordinate the weaker group. In America, there are some whites who use wealth and power to marginalize, exploit, and subordinate blacks. Whites can deny blacks employment, educational opportunities, business resources, a place to live, or right to vote. When you think about back in the 60s and 70s and even now. Therefore, according to this definition, Black people cannot be racist. No group of Blacks has the power, no group of Blacks have the power or exclusive control of resources to the degree that they can educationally, politically, economically, and socially exploit and marginalize the white race. Do I need to say that again? Maybe I should say that again. No group of Blacks, I guess unless you're Oprah, but there's a small percentage of people that have that kind of power, but no group of Blacks has the power or exclusive control of resources to the degree that they can educationally, politically, economically, and socially exploit and marginalize the white race. Blacks can only react to racism and try to alter the conditions that racism creates. Again, that was by Dr. Claude Anderson, and I believe that was in his book, Powernomics. So again, this is not a topic that I would normally talk about, but there are things that happen on a daily basis. And again, I said I grew up in the Christian environment, and you learn to turn the other cheek and not to say things that are going to make other people in the room feel uncomfortable. And that's exactly what the instructor said. When you talk about race, it makes other people in the room feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry. When you go to the store and somebody follows you around just because of the color of your skin, and they let other people who don't look like you just wander around freely, or you go into a restaurant and people watch you to make sure that you're not going to run off with the check, these things are still happening. I went to a little, I won't call it a seminar, but a little summit type of thing yesterday. And in the room, it was a good diverse group of people. I want to say 3, 6, 9, there were maybe 9 or 10 people that were invited. And we were talking about different subjects, health, and just different things that happen with people, whether you're lower income, higher income, whatever the situation is. And some of the questions that they were asking really kind of didn't pertain to me because I'm a veteran, my husband's a veteran, so we do have health insurance and those type of things. They were talking about transportation and people having to take the bus, and one of the ladies in the class happened to be Caucasian, and she might have been 65 to 70. I really can't tell. But she said she quoted a line from Martin Luther King, and she says, "See, Black people are allowed to move into our neighborhoods now. We let them do that," or something to that effect. And I was like, sometimes you just let things go because some people just don't know. If you lived in and she said she grew up in a neighborhood where all of her life, everybody in the neighborhood were white. They looked like her. And so she said, basically it sounded like she was feeling some kind of way now that there is diversity in her neighborhood, and she wasn't used to that. But it sounded like, they're letting and they're allowing African Americans to live in this neighborhood now. So again, when you're 70, 80, 90 years old, some people are set in their way, and that was a fight for another day. And I did not have a bone to pick. Sometimes you just have to walk away, or else you'll be in very insane, hostile. And of course, a lot of us women of color, we don't want to be labeled as the angry Black woman. And yes, that's the thing. If you haven't seen it, go look up Tyler Perry's movie. And there's a movie called whatever. You